Okay, so here's a quick rundown of the key points from Quiz 5. So the first question, who are the Helots? The dictionary definition, relatively straightforward. These are the serfs that work for the Spartans. They are vast in number and perform all of the agricultural labor. But the key point here is the bumper sticker summary of what's important about the Helots is the Helots farm so the Spartans do not have to. Most everybody in the ancient world spends most of their time dealing with agriculture. This is the primary preoccupation, and it gets in the way of everything else. The Spartans have devised a system where they don't have to spend their time working on farming, thinking about farming, dealing with the estate. All of that is taken care of by the Helots. And so the Spartans, the actual Spartan citizens, which is to say the warrior elite, the Spartans limit their citizenship to the warrior elite. The Spartans are able to focus all of their time and all of their energy on war, on training, on war itself, on the art of war, on becoming the ultimate hoplite soldiers and becoming the ideal society. In the sense they identify the ideal hoplite warrior with the ideal Greek citizen. And so the Helots farm so that the Spartans do not have to. The risk they pose here is that means the entire Spartan Spartan system is absolutely dependent upon the Helots. And so the Helots, if the Helots aren't there, the Helots aren't performing that function, then everything about Spartan society and culture breaks down. And so they must keep the Helots absolutely under the control. This is why the Helots are treated the way that they are, why they're used as targets in war training, why they're systematically abused and humiliated, because the Helots must be kept in their place. And this is a huge risk because the Helots are vastly outnumber the Spartans. By many orders of magnitude. The actual Spartan citizens is just the warrior elite, which is, maybe 9,000, at the most in terms of actual warriors. The number of Helots is much, much more than that. The second question, Solon. A lot of things can be said about Solon, but the key thing to be saying about Solon is that he shifts Athenian agency so that it is geared toward wealth and not blood. Now, that sounds like it still places things in the hands of the few, but with wealth, you have the opportunity for mobility. You have the sense that those who are able to accumulate wealth do so because they have some kind of talent, some kind of ability, rather than just being born into a particular family. That means that some element of merit is involved. That also means that there are a number of different classes within Athenian society that can each have a kind of share of the system rather than voice and agency only belonging to the noble families at the top of Athenian society, which is the way that it was before. And so wealth, not blood, is a primary prerequisite for shifting the center of gravity in archaic Athens away from the few toward the many. It makes possible the future development of democracy. And so you have Solon creating the shift toward wealth, not blood, and then the final stage that comes after this, several decades later, is Cleisthenes reforms which bring about actual democracy. Solon is able to accomplish this because he is trusted by the masses and by the elite. He is a voice that stands for reason, that stands for Athens. And so the other thing about Solon is he's not doing this on behalf of the poor. He's not like the tyrants, like Pisistratus, like other figures. He's not acting on behalf of the masses against the elite. He is doing this with the trust of the masses and the elite toward a stronger Athens. Clouds. Okay, so why does Strepsiades go to the thinkery? This is if you read the beginning of Clouds, you see that the Strepsiades is drowning in debt as a result of his no good son, And so the thinkery, the key point here is the thinkery offers the opportunity to talk his way out of debts that are actually valid. In other words, the thinkery teaches how to argue falsely. It teaches how to make a convincing argument regardless of merit. And this is the beginning of Aristophanes' attack on the people of the thinkery represents, which is the Sophists. Aristophanes is using this play as a call to action against the Sophists, the people that represent the moral degradation of Athens, because they're teaching people how to turn falseness into things that people accept. What the Sophists do is teach how to make arguments, from any point of view. And this is a byproduct of Athenian democracy, because the ability to speak is in demand. And the ability to persuade people to your side of things, regardless of merit, is in demand. And so the Sophists teach people how to argue regardless of justice, regardless of truth, regardless of right or wrong. You can argue anything convincingly. And Aristophanes sees this as horrific. This is moral relativism. This is, things are right and wrong depending on, what I say they are. So Strepsiades going to the thinkeries is Strepsiades is the Athenian everyman. Okay, Strepsiades represents the ordinary Athenian citizen, and he's represented as being malleable, because the Athenians are succumbing to this moral toxin, this poison that takes people away from where truth really comes from Aristophanes' point of view, which is tradition and the gods. And that Strepsiades is still represented as being, as being more capable than his son. Strepsiades is the salt of the earth farmer who represents the true Athenian. The true Athenian in the form of Strepsiades is vulnerable and at risk. But his son, Phidippides, is completely lost. He has no sense of morality, no sense of character. He very happily accumulates massive amounts of debt that he doesn't have to worry about, that he throws upon his father. And so the other thing that this represents is, from Strepsiades to Phidippides, within the space of one generation, Athens is totally lost. And so this represents the urgency of the situation, that this is happening rapidly, that Athens is succumbing to this, that the Athenians must act now against all of these forces that are taking Athens away from tradition and the gods. And the focus of this, the attack that Clowns represents, is against the Sophists as being symbolic and representative and a cancerous agent of this. Athenian comedy is used to point out something in society that is damaging, that is detrimental, and to attack it with ridicule, to make it literally ridiculous, worthy of ridicule, through the most vulgar and vicious humor possible. To make it make it go from something that people believe in and accept to something that is horrific and laughable. And that is what Aristophanes is trying to do here with the Sophists and the thinkery. Now, the second part of this question, first of all, why do I have Socrates in quotes? Because the Socrates in the play is a lie. The Socrates in the play has nothing to do with the real life Socrates. The Socrates in the play is represented as being a sophist, the leader of the sophists, the worst of them all, who teaches Strepsiades how to speak with a crooked tongue. Socrates in the play and the Sophist represents the point of view called nomos, which is that what is right and wrong is essentially a matter of convention. It's what everybody agrees that it is. And so it can be changed if you can convince people that it's something different. And that means that right and wrong is totally arbitrary. It's in the hands of what you can convince people is true. That's what the Sophists represent. The real life Socrates, the actual philosopher, Socrates, believed in the opposite of this. He believed in Pisces, which is the idea that truth and justice are absolute. They are embedded in the universe, and they are beyond the whims of mortals or gods. Strepsiades sees both of these points of view as detrimental to Athens' greatness, because both of them ignore the gods themselves. Aristophanes believes that truth and justice comes from tradition and the gods. And so what he does is he takes the Sophists, which he despises because they represent this moral relativism, this arbitrary idea of truth. And he takes the philosopher Socrates, who represents the idea of absolute truth that ignores the gods, and he libels Socrates by making him the leader of the Sophists. And this is to attack two birds with one stone. And it's hugely successful in that this play is part of the damage to Socrates' reputation in real life that ultimately culminates right after the end of the Peloponnesian War with his execution for irreligion, the very crime that is tacitly implied here with the way Socrates is handled. And so the question here, how does Socrates first enter? He first enters from above, being lowered by a basket. Now, in the context of Athenian plays, what does it mean when someone is lowered from a basket? Normally, this happens at the end of a tragedy when the god appears, lowered from the proscenium, and dispenses justice before returning to heaven. This is called Deus ex machina, God from the machine. Why we have a Latin term for this instead of a Greek term is a topic for another discussion. But so the point here is that Socrates is being lowered from the proscenium as if he were a god, and this is to point out, this is to single out the fake Socrates in the play for ridicule by making it look like he thinks he's a god, by making it look like he has his head in the clouds, anything that you want to associate with this. But this is the first moment that the fake Socrates appears. Is done to target him for ridicule and to lump him in falsely with the Sophists. Powerful groups in Athens include all the following except, and the answer is C, the two kings and the royal families, because as you should be aware, there are no kings in Athens. The two kings are in Sparta. All the rest of the Greek polis, all the rest of the Greek city-states have dispensed with the kings altogether. Sparta is the only exception. It has two kings, which are there only to serve as generals, and so they're not really acting as traditional kings either. But either way, there are no kings in classical Athens. The Athenians have dispensed with the kings, just like all the other Greek city-states. Finally, what would you say are some of the disadvantages of radical democracy as practiced in Athens? By radical democracy, I mean pure democracy in which the people themselves have complete power. And this is something that is only true in classical Athens. It happens nowhere else in the world, in history, where you have this complete, pure, radical form in which all the power is given to the people. And the test of this is, the test of democracy, the real test of democracy is that all decisions are made by the people, including the agenda that's placed before them. Most other cities, all the other Greek city-states, have assemblies that vote on things, but even in Athens, up until Cleisthenes' reforms, the agenda that is put before the assembly is decided by the elite. With Cleisthenes, you have the agenda is being placed by the council, the boule, which is made up of citizens chosen by lot. And so, instead of representatives of the noble families as it had been before, this means that the citizens of Athens are truly deciding things for themselves. So what's the downside of that? Well, first of all, peculiar to Athens, we have the fact that Athens is this massive polis because it incorporates all of Attica, and so there's this whole rural population that finds it very difficult to get into Athens and arrive on the Pnyx and be there for the assembly. You have to actually be present, there, in the assembly space, in the Pnyx, the field right outside the confines of Athens, in order for your citizenship to mean anything. And for a lot of people in the polis of Athens, this is a day's journey away. You lose an entire day in the fields, or even if you're living in the urban areas on the coast, the assembly meets all the time, every 10 days sometimes, and losing a day in your shop, closing down your shop, having everybody go or whatever. A lot of people can't afford to show up for the assembly, and so the assembly ends up being skewed toward the population that has the ability to actually be there for the assembly all the time. More generally, what you want to think about is, okay, you have this body of citizens that decides things by majority vote. That means that the majority interest is what prevails, and so people with minority interests are always left out of the game. This is called the tyranny of the majority, and this is something, if you take early American history, this is something that the Federalists talk about in the Federalist Papers. We have this here in classical Athens, that the majority, the people that have something in common that makes up a larger portion of the population, ends up getting their way, and the smaller group, the minorities, whatever different kinds of minorities there are, have less agency, are partially disenfranchised as a result. The other thing that you have to worry about is that you have blocks of people that are similar in size, that are hostile to each other, and this can create the inability of the government to move forward. This is faction, and we know about faction from our own times. But this is a direct consequence of majority rule. And then finally, the thing that I wanted to emphasize is demagoguery, the ability of somebody to gain power by telling the voters what they want to hear. And this is something that plays directly into the ability to speak, and therefore into the questions of sophism that are raised by clouds. So that's this week's quiz, and we'll talk more about this in the discussion.